The night, the wind cried. The wind screamed like a dying thing through the boards of the old barn. Snow lashed against the walls, rattling them until frost fell from the beams. Inside, Elias Crow was fighting with his stubborn latch, trying to keep the northern door from slamming open again. His lantern swung from a nail, throwing long, crooked shadows across the horse's flanks. "Easy buck," he muttered, voice low calm. The big gray stallion stamped once, snorted, and shivered. Then, thud, a sound cut through the storm, faint but clear. It wasn't the wind this time. It was heavier. Elias froze, his gloved hand resting on the door. The horse's ears flicked up, eyes wide and white in the lantern's glow. Another sound came, closer now, something dragging, something alive. He moved to the far end of the barn, boots crunching over straw stiff with frost. He stopped, listening. The storm seemed to hold its breath. Then, faintly, through the roar of the wind, a knock. 3 slow, uneven taps on the wood. Elias's jaw tightened. Nobody came out this far, not in a storm like this. He lifted the lantern, the flame trembling in its glass, and pulled the bar from the latch. The door groaned open. The night rushed in, snow biting his face, the wind clawing at his coat. At first he saw nothing but white. Then a figure stumbled out of the dark, a woman, her body swaying like a reed in the gale. Before Elias could speak, she collapsed. He caught her by instinct. Her body was light, frozen through, the fabric of her dress stiff as paper. The lantern light caught on lace of all things, and the edge of a veil. A wedding veil. Lord above, he breathed. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut with his heel. The wind tried to follow, shrieking one last time before it was shut out. He set her down by the fire pit, stripped off his gloves, and struck a match. The flame trembled, caught, and grew. When the firelight reached her face, he stopped moving. She was young, no more than 20. Her lips were blue, her skin ghost pale, her eyes closed tight. The white dress was torn at the shoulder, the hem black with mud. Around her wrist, beneath the lace, a raw burn circled the flesh. Elias reached for a blanket, cursing softly. He wrapped it around her, rubbed her arms, trying to force warmth back into the frozen skin. "Don't you quit now," he said quietly. "Not here. Not tonight." Her chest rose, shallow. Then again. He breathed out slow. "That's it. Keep fighting, miss." The wind hit the door again, hard enough to make the hinges groan. He threw another log on the fire and sat back on his heels. The lantern flickered across the barn's beams, catching the glint of his tools. Everything neat, measured, ordered. A soldier's precision in a rancher's hands. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, only the crackle of fire and the faint sound of a woman breathing. An hour passed before she stirred. Her hand twitched first, then her lips. Elias poured a tin cup of water, lifted her head gently, and let a few drops touch her tongue. Her eyes fluttered open. They were the color of faded sky. "You're safe," Elias said, voice low. "You're at Hollow Creek Ranch." She blinked, tried to speak. No sound came. He nodded toward the fire. "You got caught in the storm. Near froze to death." Her gaze shifted, slow, confused. "Storm," she whispered, voice cracked. "Where?" He hesitated. "You wandered in from the East Ridge. Ain't much out there but Greeley's place." The name hit her like a slap. She flinched, tried to sit up, then clutched her side and winced. Elias steadied her. "You know him?" he asked. For a moment, she said nothing. Then her head dipped once. "My husband." Elias leaned back, his brow tightening. "The neighbor. Hank Greeley. Mean drunk, loud in town, cruel to his stock and rougher on his women. Folks whispered plenty, though none dared interfere." He looked again at her dress. White satin, torn at the seams, a stain near the bodice that wasn't mud. "You come from his house in that." She closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek and froze before it fell. He didn't ask again. Instead, he stood, walked to a barrel, and ladled water into a pot. He set it by the fire, dropped in a handful of coffee grounds. The smell rose rich and bitter. When he turned back, she was watching him, her face still pale, but her eyes sharper now, searching. You didn't leave me," she whispered. He stared into the fire. Couldn't. Silence stretched. The wind outside softened, like it had lost its rage. Finally, she spoke again, voice barely a breath. They said, I was cursed. Elias looked up. My family, his family, said my bad luck killed him. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. He disappeared 2 nights ago. I think he's dead. The lantern hissed softly. Elias's face didn't change, but his eyes darkened. Who else was there? Men. 4 of them. They took the horses. Said I was payment for his debts. Her words broke on a whisper. They tried to sell me. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the fire popped, sending up a spray of sparks. Then Elias stood, slow and deliberate. He crossed to the barn door, lifted the latch, and looked out into the storm. Snow still fell thick, covering everything. Tracks, blood, the past itself. Behind him, the horses stamped nervously, catching his unease. He closed the door again and bolted it tight. You'll stay here tonight, he said quietly. We'll see what daylight brings. She nodded, small and trembling. Elias poured her a cup of coffee and set it in her hands. His fingers brushed hers, ice cold still. Careful. It's hot. Her eyes lifted to his face. Why are you helping me? He stared into the fire, its light carving the lines of his face, the hollows of a man long at war with silence. Because nobody helped mine, he said at last. She looked at him, uncomprehending, but didn't ask more. The wind howled once more outside, as if testing the walls. The horses shifted. Somewhere far off, faint under the storm's cry, came the distant echo of hooves. Elias's eyes narrowed. He set down his cup. The firelight caught the old scar across his knuckles. He moved to the window slit, looked out toward the dark horizon, and saw, just for an instant, a flicker of lantern light moving through the snow. He said nothing, just reached up, turned down the lamp, and stood there in the half-dark, watching. The woman, Hank Greeley's forsaken bride, sat by the fire, clutching her blanket tight. Elias Crow stood in the shadows, listening, and the wind outside began to cry again. The bride in the barn. The smell of gun oil filled the air before dawn. Elias Crow sat on a wooden stool by the dying fire, his hands moving with quiet precision, loading shells, checking chambers, cleaning what he'd sworn never to touch again. His revolvers lay open on the table like 2 sleeping beasts. Outside, the wind had gone still, but the silence that followed was heavier than any storm. The woman stirred on the cot nearby. The blanket slid from her shoulder, the white lace of her torn dress catching in the firelight. She blinked, eyes red from sleeplessness. Where are you going? Elias didn't look up. Nowhere. Not yet. She sat up, shivering, watching the motion of his hands. The steady click of metal on metal sounded like distant thunder in the small barn. You're a soldier, she whispered. His jaw tightened. Used to be. She hesitated. You fought in the war? Elias stopped, just for a moment. The steel in his hand reflected the orange glow of the fire. Something like that. He slid a cartridge into place, slow and deliberate, and turned toward her. You sleep at all? A little. Her voice trembled. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. Who? The men who came to take me. Her breath hitched, the words trembling as if torn from her chest. They wore black coats, called themselves the Black Creek Riders. Hank owed them money. He said he'd pay with the horses, but when that wasn't enough, she stopped. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Elias waited. She swallowed hard. They said I'd fetch more than any mare he ever owned. They laughed when he agreed. The fire cracked. Elias's gaze didn't move from her face. What happened to him, he asked. I ran before they could take me. Hank followed. There was shouting. Gunfire. I fell. When I woke, I was alone in the snow. Her fingers dug into the blanket. I don't know if he's dead. I don't care. Elias set the revolver down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Black Creek Riders, he murmured, the name heavy in his mouth. You sure that's what they called themselves? She nodded. You know them? The fire popped again, and for a moment the light flared across his eyes, the color of cold iron. I knew them, he said. A long time ago. She studied him, confusion flickering through the fear. You rode with them? He stood, walked to the barn wall, and pressed a hand against the old boards. Before they started selling people, silence hung between them, thick, raw. Finally, she whispered, "What happened to you?" He turned back, the lines in his face deep as carved wood. "I left them. Thought that'd be enough." "And was it?" He met her gaze. "You tell me." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind outside moaned again, low and long, like a warning carried through the snow. Elias crossed to the far stall, lifted a heavy tarp, and pulled free a wooden chest bound in rusted iron. He set it on the ground, brushed the dust away, and opened it. Inside lay 2 revolvers, gleaming faintly beneath the lamplight, and a tarnished badge stamped with U.S. Marshal across its face. The woman stared. "You were law. Once." He closed the lid halfway. "Long time ago. Didn't end well." He picked up the badge, turned it over in his hand, and then placed it gently on the table beside his gun belt. Her eyes lingered on it. "Will they come?" He nodded. "They'll come. They don't leave things unfinished." A shiver ran through her. "Then I should go. I'll draw them away." Elias shook his head. "You won't make it half a mile in that dress. They'll find you, and this time they won't miss. I can't hide here forever. You won't have to." She swallowed, voice unsteady. "You're going to fight them, aren't you?" He didn't answer. He poured water from a kettle, washed his hands slowly, like a man scrubbing blood he couldn't see. When he finally spoke, his tone was low, steady, almost tender. "You said they came 2 nights ago?" "Yes." "Then they'll be tracking by now. Snow hides what it can, but men like them can smell fear miles off." He looked toward the door. The faintest shadow moved against it. "Just wind. Or maybe not. Stay near the fire," he said. "If I say down, you drop flat. Don't look up. Don't make a sound." She nodded, clutching the blanket tighter. "I'm not helpless," she murmured, half to herself. He gave her a long, quiet look. "Didn't say you were." Then he walked to the workbench, pulled open a drawer, and handed her a rifle, long, oiled, and heavy. She hesitated, then gripped it with surprising steadiness. "My father taught me," she said softly. Elias gave a single nod. "Then we might have a chance." Hours later, pale morning broke over the ridges. The snow glittered cruelly under the light. Elias stepped outside, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved except the wind curling over the drifts. He could feel it, though, the shift in the air, the weight of being watched. When he returned inside, she was standing by the fire, veil gone, hair undone, the rifle resting against her shoulder. The fear in her eyes had hardened into something else, resolve. Elias studied her for a moment. "You got a name?" "Clara," she said. He nodded once. "All right, Clara. If this turns bad, you get to the back stall. There's a ladder to the loft. Don't stop till you can't hear me anymore." She didn't move. "And you?" "I'll be here." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, then closed again. Outside, a distant sound echoed, faint, rhythmic, unmistakable. Hooves. Clara's grip on the rifle tightened. "They found us." Elias moved to the door, eyes narrowing. "Took them less time than I hoped." Through the narrow gap in the boards, he saw them, black coats against the snow, a dozen riders cresting the ridge, their lanterns bobbing like dying stars. He turned back to Clara. "Get ready." The horses in the stalls began to stamp and snort, sensing the tension. The barn filled with their breath, hot and white against the cold. Clara stepped closer to him, her voice barely a whisper. "You could leave me. You be safe." Elias holstered his gun, checking the weight. Safe's a word for men with nothing left to lose. The hooves grew louder, closer, steady, deliberate. The sound of judgment riding through the snow. Elias blew out the lantern, leaving only the fire's red glow flickering across the walls. Shadows stretched long and deep. He glanced once at Clara, her face pale but set, her hands steady on the rifle. Then he spoke, quiet as a prayer. "If the riders come for her, they'll find something waiting they won't forget." The barn went silent again. Outside, the wind began to rise, slow, cold, and hollow, like the breath of something old that had just awakened. Ghosts of the past ride again. The first bullet hit the barn door before sunrise, with splintered inches from Elias Crow's shoulder. He ducked low, dragging Clara with him as another round tore through the boards. The horses reared, their panic filling the air with screams and pounding hooves. "Down!" Elias barked. Clara dropped beside the trough, clutching the rifle tight to her chest. Her breath came in white clouds. The fire had burned low, only embers now, glowing red against the dark. Through a crack in the wall, Elias counted 12 riders fanned across the snowfield, their coats black and stiff with frost. Lanterns swung from their saddles, ghostly in the dawn light. The man in front, tall, wide-shouldered, rode with a slow, easy sway, like he owned the world. Cal Black. Elias hadn't seen him in 15 years, but he knew that silhouette anywhere. The riders spread out, circling the barn. Elias could hear their laughter, mean and sure of itself. "You think they'll talk first?" Clara whispered. "They'll talk," Elias said, loading his revolver. "Just before they shoot." A voice thundered through the storm, deep, rough, familiar. "Crow, you still breathing in there?" Elias's hand paused halfway to his holster. The sound of that voice cracked something old inside him. Cal Black laughed. "Heard a story you'd gone soft. Buried your badge, buried your past. Guess I was wrong." Elias stepped into the sliver of light coming through the boards. "You're late, Cal. Thought you died with the rest." Another round of laughter rolled over the snow. "Not hardly, but I came to fix that mistake." Elias drew his gun, the weight of it familiar, steady. "You rode all this way for me." Cal's reply came cold. "Not just you. Heard you picked up something that belongs to me." Elias glanced at Clara, her eyes wide but steady now. She mouthed one word, "Me." "Then you heard wrong," Elias called back. "Don't matter," Cal said. "We'll burn that barn and pick through what's left." The riders moved. Elias fired first. The shot cracked through the morning stillness, echoing off the frozen ridge. One man fell from his horse, face first into the snow. Chaos followed. Muzzle flashes, the roar of rifles, the scream of terrified horses. Elias ducked back, reloading. "Keep low." Window slit left side. Clara crawled to the narrow opening, steadied the rifle on the ledge, and fired. The recoil jolted her shoulder, but one of the black coats dropped hard, snow bursting around him. She looked at Elias. He gave a curt nod. The riders answered with fire. Bullets ripped through the boards, straw flying. The horses in the stalls kicked and screamed. Smoke and frost filled the air. Cal's voice rose again. "You ain't the law anymore, Crow. Ain't no badge gonna save you this time." Elias didn't answer. He moved through the shadows, counting steps, every motion quiet, deliberate. He pushed open the back hatch of the barn and slipped into the cold. Clara watched him vanish into the storm. Her heart thudded so hard she could barely hear the gunfire. She wanted to call after him, but his last look had said everything, stay alive. Outside, Elias moved through the snow like a ghost. He circled behind the riders, the revolver heavy in his gloved hand. He saw their breath rising like steam. He saw Cal's horse stamping, restless. He took aim. One shot, then another. 2 more men fell before they even turned. "Crow's out," someone shouted. "Behind us." Cal wheeled his horse, fury flashing in his eyes. "Find him." Elias ducked behind a dead oak stump, reloading fast. The storm's edge whipped snow across his face. He heard Clara's rifle fire again from the barn. Sharp, sure. The men were losing their nerve. The silence between gunfire grew longer, tighter. Elias called out, voice carrying through the cold. "You think the past forgets, Cal? It don't. It waits." Cal laughed, but it was hollow now. "You always did talk too much." He dismounted, drew his own gun, and stalked forward through the snow. "Come on out, lawman." Elias stepped from behind the stump, revolver raised. Their eyes met across 20 paces of white. "Still wearing that silver badge?" Cal sneered. Elias looked down at the tarnished star pinned to his chest. Figured it might shine one last time. The 2 men fired. The sound cracked the sky. Elias's shot hit first. Cal staggered but didn't fall. His bullet grazed Elias's arm, spinning him sideways into the snow. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then Clara's voice cut through the wind. "Elias." She ran from the barn, rifle in hand. The snow dragged at her skirts, but she kept running. Cal raised his gun toward her, one eye closed, bleeding, smile twisted. Elias lunged from the ground, slammed into him, and both men went down hard. The gun skittered away across the ice. They rolled, fists and boots and blood in the snow. Cal's strength was brute, desperate. Elias's was cold, measured, full of quiet rage. "You should have stayed gone," Cal hissed, his hand reaching for a hidden knife. Elias caught his wrist, twisted hard. "You should have stayed dead." The blade fell. Elias drove a fist into Cal's throat, then pressed the revolver barrel against his chest. Cal's eyes widened. For the first time, he looked afraid. "You kill me, Crow, and you'll be right back where you started." Elias hesitated, just for a breath. Then Clara's voice came again, soft but fierce. "He already is." Elias pulled the trigger. The sound was final, like a door closing forever. The other riders broke and fled, their horses vanishing into the white. The silence that followed was deeper than before, the kind that only comes after death. Elias knelt in the snow beside Cal's body. His breath came slow, ragged. He felt the weight of every ghost he'd ever carried. Clara dropped beside him, her face pale, streaked with tears. "You're hurt," she said. He looked down at the blood soaking his sleeve. "Had worse." She helped him stand. Together they looked at the horizon, where dawn finally burned through the clouds, pale gold cutting through the gray. The barn smoked faintly behind them. The horses whickered, uneasy but alive. Clara turned to him. "What now?" Elias stared out over the snowfield littered with bodies. "They'll send more. They always do. Then we'll be ready." He almost smiled at that, almost. The wind rose again, colder now, carrying the faint echo of distant hooves fading into nothing. Elias holstered his gun, the weight no longer foreign. "Guess the past found me, after all," he said quietly. Clara looked at him. The man who'd saved her, the ghost who'd come back to life. "No," she said. "You found yourself." The light caught her face, the fire in her eyes. For the first time, Elias Crow felt the storm break inside him. And above them, the wind whispered through the broken fences, a sound like the plains themselves remembering. The storm and the dawn. The first gunshot shattered the dawn. Elias didn't flinch. He'd been waiting for it. From the open doorway of a barn, his shadow cut across the frostbitten yard where riders came charging through the thinning fog. 5 of them, faces wrapped, guns drawn, dust rising like smoke from hell. May stood behind him, clutching the shotgun he'd taught her to use, her breath sharp and visible in the cold. "They found us," she whispered. Elias stepped out, slow and steady. Then we stopped running. The second shot kicked up dirt near his boots. He didn't return fire. Not yet. He waited until the lead rider came clear of the haze, the stallion's mane white as the frost. "Logan sent you, didn't he?" Elias called out, voice low as gravel. The rider grinned beneath a torn scarf. "You took what's his, old man. She ain't property." The words hung heavy, thicker than gunpowder smoke. Then everything broke loose. Gunfire roared. Splinters flew from the barn posts. Elias rolled behind the trough, iron glinting as he drew the Colt from his coat. Smooth, practiced like his hands had been born knowing the weight of steel. The widow's quiet rancher was gone. In his place stood something carved from older wars, a man who'd seen death and learned its rhythm. He fired once. The lead rider fell. Twice. Another screamed, slumping from the saddle. May's hands trembled, but when she aimed and squeezed the trigger, the sound cracked through the air like thunder. One more fell. Elias turned. Inside. "Reload." She obeyed, ducking behind the stall door, fumbling shells into the chamber. He covered her, reloading without looking, each motion precise as a prayer. Then came the silence, the kind that isn't peace, just a pause before hell resumes. A voice called from the fog, smooth, familiar. "Didn't reckon I'd find you playing hero, old friend." Elias froze. The voice dragged him back years, to gunfire in Mexico, to a uniform heavy with dust, to the man who once saved his life. "Logan," Elias said quietly. The fog shifted, and there he was, coat black as pitch, hat low, a revolver gleaming at his side. "You were supposed to die in Tucson," Logan said, "not hide out raising cattle and keeping my bride." "She wasn't yours," Elias answered, stepping into the open. "Not by law, not by God, not by the way you left her to die." May's voice cracked from behind the door. "Elias." He raised a hand. "Stay back." The two men faced each other, years of sin and blood burning between them. The fog curled around their boots like ghosts. "You were always the righteous one," Logan sneered, "preaching about redemption while shooting faster than the devil's blink." Elias holstered his gun slowly. "You're right. I did a lot I ain't proud of. But this," he nodded toward the barn, toward May. "This is my redemption." Logan smiled thinly. "Then let's see if heaven will take you." The world snapped into motion. Both men drew at once. 2 shots, so close they sounded like one. Elias staggered, a hand pressed to his shoulder. Logan dropped to one knee, shock widening his eyes. Blood darkened his coat. He fired again, wild. Elias ducked, rolled, came up on one knee, and fired a final time. The bullet struck true. Logan fell face first in the frost. For a moment, only the wind spoke, carrying the smell of gunpowder, of endings. May ran to Elias, catching him as his knees buckled. "You're hit. Just a graze." He smiled weakly. "Didn't think I'd get to see another sunrise." She pressed her hand against the wound, tears streaking through the dirt on her face. "You fool. You weren't supposed to die. Savon me." He laughed, soft, rasping. "Reckon it's the first thing I ever did right." The fog began to lift. Beyond the ranch, the horizon burned gold, washing the land clean. The surviving horses from Logan's men scattered toward the hills, free and wild. Elias pushed himself up, leaning on May's shoulder. Together they watched the dawn unfold over the plains, red and fierce like a promise. "Time to bury the past," he said quietly. They dug graves by the cottonwoods, the ground hard with frost. When it was done, Elias stood for a long while, hat in hand. "They'll come looking," May said softly. He nodded. "Maybe, but this time they'll find a man ready." That evening, as the wind turned warm and the sky went violet, Elias sat on the porch, cleaning his coat for the last time. May brought him coffee, her hand brushing his, steady, trusting. "You ever going to tell me who you really were?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Just a man who once lost everything and found something worth living for again." From the hills, the coyotes sang long, lonely notes that seemed to echo the story itself. Years later, old folks in a nearby town would tell it different ways. Some said he'd been a gunfighter, others claimed a deserter, or a soldier haunted by ghosts. But they all agreed on one thing. That winter, a forsaken bride was found half dead in a stranger's barn. And by the time spring came, both the barn and the man who saved her had become legend.